Welcome in, everybody. There's no better way to start a week against the Kansas Jayhawks than with a little sandstorm. So we're ready to go. It was an interesting weekend in Fort Worth for K-State. You kind of felt like they were due for a loss, but it didn't work out the way you would have liked. I mean, you probably feel a little bit better if they had shown up and played well, but I think that the staff and the players handled it pretty well afterwards. They were obviously pissed off about the loss, and they were upset about the way it went, but they also understand they got 15 more or 13 more of these games to be played, and they aren't too worried about just one against TCU. Keontae Johnson was fired up in the Big 12. You get a second shot against everybody. So they will be looking forward to that game with TCU when they come back to Manhattan later this year. But the main event of the season is always the game with KU, especially the one in Bramlage Coliseum, where hopefully we get to hear this great song tomorrow. At some point, it's a 5-point game. Bill Self has used a timeout. There's 3:33 left to play. The Cats are feeling the momentum. The student section has been on their best behavior all night. There's only been a few FKU chants. And Gene Taylor, he looks at whoever's in charge of the sound system, and he just says, "Play it, baby." And as we get ready, everybody's just waiting for the crowd to erupt. You start to hear a murmur as things come about, and Sandstorm is on its way. It had been gone for so long, and now you can trust everybody, and maybe you toss in a few vulgar chants. That happens, but it's Sandstorm time. So I'll cut the music. We'll get it out of there and be done with it. But I just had to get that out there to start the day. And then we'll be serious the rest of the way today. No more hijinks because there is serious business to tend to. We will actually, while we are live, be getting the newest Top 25 that'll be coming out. Disaster didn't strike, so Houston will probably remain number 1 in the country. KU will stay at number 2. K-State probably going to fall a couple of spots, so we will have to wait and see how that plays out for the Wildcats. But it'll be a top 25 matchup tomorrow night in Allen Fieldhouse, and K-State will try and bounce back after their first loss of the season to TCU. KU, they almost lost. They almost lost there. Or, well, second. Well, first Big 12 loss.
There you go.
Is what I'm getting at. Who cares about the non-con? You play well enough in the non-con does not matter. It does not matter right now for K-State. They're all about conference play. But for KU, they could have easily have lost to Iowa State over the weekend, but they were able to get some of that Allen Fieldhouse magic going for them. Vegas is just never going to learn that the Jayhawks don't lose in Allen Fieldhouse, so quit making them underdogs there. But let's start with K-State TCU, how that game played out. We had all of our coverage up from it on Saturday. I think there were a few themes that were pretty much consistent in the entire thing. Number one was that K-State, the turnovers, they smack you in the face immediately. The Wildcats couldn't hang on to the basketball. It was not a good day for Keontae Johnson in the turnover department. Marquise Noel turned the ball over a lot, and they weren't just like, I don't know. They weren't like turnovers that just happen over the course of the game. It was like the Monstars had taken their basketball ability and they were just like, I don't know how to handle the basketball right now. That's some of the turnovers that Keontae Johnson had in the game for K-State. And a lot of the turnovers were live ball turnovers that TCU turned into easy points the other way. The Frogs ended up with 32 fast break points on Saturday, 26 points off of turnovers and 54 points in the paint. And that was the other thing that really stood out to me. It was a concern going into it, but TCU's not a great matchup for K-State because they like to bang inside, and they got some better built bodies in there. K-State's got good bigs, I would say. Naquan Tomlin, David Gasson when he's healthy, and Bebe Igiola has given them some good boosts. But K-State doesn't really have anybody that I feel comfortable with their paint defense. Like, they're not good at actually defending down low, and we saw that Eddie Lampkin was able to have a great day. And another part of it too was Bebe Igiola, he was trailing bigs that had no business being beyond the perimeter, and he was following them out there, and that left the paint wide open. So those were the glaring things that stood out to me from K-State's loss against TCU on Saturday. What are your takeaways from that game, Alec?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a lot in our post-game fast break video that you can still watch on our YouTube or watch on the homepage as well. To me, the biggest thing was the way Marquise Noel played. Obviously, we saw him play at an incredible level in K-State's undefeated start to Big 12 play, and we knew that play wasn't able to be sustained or wasn't able to be replicated throughout the entirety of conference play. But to see him kind of fall the way that he did, I know he finished with 16 points and he finished 6 of 14 from the field, but a lot of those buckets and a lot of those points came late. And like you said, the 6 turnovers were pretty costly. Only 4 assists. I'd imagine that's one of his lower assist totals on the year. Kansas State simply isn't going to beat quality teams, particularly on the road, if Marquise Noel isn't one of the best players on the team. And he wasn't one of the best players on the team, and he definitely wasn't one of the best players on the court on Saturday in Fort Worth against TCU. So K-State definitely needs him to play at a high level to win against quality Big 12 opponents. And like we know, Mason, I mean, everyone in the Big 12 tends to be a pretty good opponent this year, even if you look at some of the bottom tier teams right now. Texas Tech still winless in the league. West Virginia is still winless in the league. And I think a few of us still have some questions about how good Oklahoma really is and whether or not they're an NCAA tournament team or not. But Kansas State needs Marquise Noel to be one of the best players on the court. And I know this is something we said on last week's podcast or have said in group chats with you, me, and Gabe is how common is it or how rare is it that K-State's going to have the 2 best players on the court come the rest of the season or come an NCAA tournament matchup. And you feel really good about your chances when that's the case. I mean, even tomorrow night against Kansas, like I think you can make a legitimate argument that K-State might have the 2 best players on the court. Now, I don't know if I would agree with that argument, but I think you can make that argument. And I think a lot of people wouldn't call you a moron for making that argument. But
people in Lawrence might call you that, but people in Lawrence might call you that, but
yeah,
everybody else
might
agree with
right?
you.
Like they might have a point. I would probably say that Jalen Wilson's probably up in that conversation, but K-State needs Marquise Noel and they need Keontae Johnson to be one of the Big 12's best duos if K-State's going to win, not just in the Big 12, but particularly win road games. And Keontae Johnson, similar to Marquise, I mean, finished close to 50% from the field, had 18 points, 9 rebounds. So he's continuing to just give good effort on the glass, but 7 turnovers is costly. His turnovers have been an issue all year. He's probably over 3 turnovers a game at this point after the 7 he had against TCU. Like those things can happen, particularly against good teams and particularly against a TCU team that's so good in transition and so good at getting buckets at the rim and fast break opportunities.
Yeah, I just kind of think that the way things went for K-State, it was unfortunate that of your 2 best players play their worst games together. And the scoring doesn't look like that in the end, but it was still not a great day for him. Marquise Noel didn't get going until late. And I actually appreciated when after the game, somebody asked him about what it was that he was able to finally get going like late in the game. And he just said, well, we were down by 20 points. Like that's a pretty good and honest assessment of how things are going. And I know like it's not much, but I do at least appreciate when you see guys that will say that, because there would have been other guys that wouldn't have been as honest about that and just been like, hey, we were bad, we were down, so it was easy to score. So, I mean, his numbers ended up not looking great. He had 6 turnovers. Keontae Johnson had 7 turnovers, even though Keontae comes within a rebound shy of having an 18-point double-double. The scary part is that he was also maybe equally as close to a triple-double with turnovers. So, K-State, I think that's not like the biggest of concerns because they've been better with turnovers over the last couple of weeks. TCU wasn't turning the ball over much either, but it's tough to turn the ball over when you are just in open traffic and able to go up and get a lay-in. And that was kind of the similar thing to the game was allowed to be pretty physical. K-State got into some fouling issues in the second half. TCU avoided that. It's pretty tough to draw fouls when you don't have the ball for very long and you're giving it to the other team. So I think really that's one of those games where there are things to pick out for Jerome Tang and his staff that this is alarming. We need to correct this, but also they have the understanding of we have already 4 other games in conference play and in total 15 games this season to look at to tell us that's not the team that we are. We're better than that. And so you don't need to act like the sky is falling. And I thought Jerome Tang was maybe overly calm about that after the loss to TCU. It didn't seem to beat him up too bad, which I think we'll see how it is moving forward as more losses come because they are bound to come in the Big 12 play. I think that's fine. I do know that like some people have talked about this at Indiana with Mike Woodson is with his, and this doesn't apply to Tang because he doesn't have this background, but I'll tell you where I'm going with it. Woodson has the NBA background where it's like you lose a couple games and whatever, like we play 82 of them. And it doesn't seem like there's as much urgency for Indiana after they lose a game. I don't think that's going to be the problem for K-State where Jerome Tang is like so comfortable with his team that like he's able to handle multiple losses. But I think he is also smart enough to understand he's been around basketball long enough. He's been in this league long enough to know that there's no reason to freak out over a bad performance on the road against TCU, and they'll be ready. I think it's beneficial that you get to come back to home to play the game after that, and you also are able to do it against Kansas, where there's going to be no lack of motivation and there's going to be no lack of crowd entertainment. And that's honestly like going back to the loss to Butler. I would have wished, and again, this staff had no real decision-making power over the schedule that they dealt with this year. I didn't like the fact that their first game after the Thanksgiving tournament in the Cayman Islands was a road game with that kind of layoff against a team that, I mean, Butler's not great, but they're a solid team with a good coach. It would have been nice if, similar to what Kansas did, like Kansas before they played their Big 12 Big East Challenge game, they played a bye game at home on like that Monday. That's something moving forward that I think is important because you can kind of get your legs back under you and you don't have to go out and immediately be thrown into the fire. And I think for K-State, it's beneficial that it's KU at home on Tuesday after a performance like that, as opposed to like, it'd be a little scary if it was a road game at Texas Tech on Tuesday, a team that's hungry and you're going on the road again, as opposed to you get to come to a fired up home environment and you're going to want to play your best. And I think it's a pretty impressive performance from Marquise Noel because he's coming off of a bad game. And I think he also wants to avenge the blown halftime lead last year to KU at home. So we'll see how it ends up going down. A couple of other things from the game with TCU that kind of carry over into this game with Kansas. I said it afterwards after we did our video from Shawmeyer, but I think TCU might be one of, if not the toughest matchups for K-State in the Big 12 this season because of the size and physicality they bring inside. K-State just doesn't have a way to really match that right now. Like Naquan Tomlin isn't really able to handle it. Ish Massoud's not a great defender, and he especially isn't that great down low when he's having to go up against some of the big bodies that TCU had. And Bebe, he struggled with his defense a little bit on Saturday, not just inside, but also following guys where he really had no business of doing. So I think that's a tough matchup for K-State. And I think in a weird way, like if you're just talking about matching up, KU is actually a much better matchup for K-State than what TCU is and a lot of other teams.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I should say, I just think the overwhelming size, like you said, that TCU has on the inside with someone like Eddie Lampkin just is not favorable for K-State. And like I said in that video as well, like if there's one area that the Big 12 isn't elite at, it's interior play. Obviously, I said Texas has two really good bigs with guys like Christian Bishop and Dylan Disu, but those are the two best bigs. Eddie Lampkin's obviously in that conversation as well, but the rest of the league doesn't really have someone that you can kind of circle Mason and say, all right, that's a All-American type player on the interior. I know KJ Adams is having a really good season and a really good Big 12 stretch for Kansas, but at the same time, like he's not someone who's 7 feet tall or even like 6'10", 6'9". So that's obviously something that bodes well for K-State in this matchup against Kansas. Is in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like they have size advantages. When you look at what Kansas kind of has on their roster. I mean, obviously, K-State's going to have a big advantage on the inside with Adams being smaller. And then they're also going to have an advantage, maybe not an advantage, but they're also going to have an equalness, I guess, if that's a word, that you can use on the perimeter with guys like, Dick being 6'8", Keontae 6'7", 6'8". Cam Carter is obviously around like 6'4", 6'5". That matches up pretty decently with someone like McCullough, who's 6'6". It just kind of continues across the board. And obviously Noel is only 5'8", and DeJuan Harris, your guy over there, favorite point guard in the Big 12 from everything I understand, is 6'1", but Harris is only like 170, 175 pounds at most, right?
Yeah.
So, he's rail thin. Like Marquise is a little bit thicker. I think Marquise maybe is a little bit stronger, so he can kind of overcome some of his height disadvantages there against Harris. But Harris is obviously one of the better defenders in the entire Big 12, coming off of being named All Big 12 defensive team a year ago. So I think the size matchup definitely favors K-State more against the Jayhawks than it did against the Horned Frogs on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, likely the tallest player that sees the floor for significant minutes for Kansas on Tuesday is 6'8". Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick are both 6'8".
Yeah, I
And
mean, Uday will
K-State,
play, but like
and
in Uday's
yeah,
6'11", but he's not going to give you a ton of minutes, right?
yeah, no, he's only averaging like 7 minutes a game this year. Same type of thing. They could throw Clements out there. Clements is like under 6 minutes a game. So maybe if that's something they think they have the guy that can be physical, but Kansas doesn't, to me, have the guys that are going to be like that physical, back to the basket, inside the paint type dudes. Because even though Jalen Wilson has the size, he wants to play outside. Like he wants to
Yeah.
do a lot of the things that you would expect more so of like a 3 or even a 2. Like he wants to be outside, he wants to shoot it, and then he can use his athleticism and get to the rack on you. But I think it's going to be a pretty equal matchup for K-State. I mean, obviously KU has the higher end talent. Like Wilson and Dick are two of the best players in college basketball. Like, and that's not just like Keontae and Marquise, who are also two of the best in college basketball, but KU has guys that are legitimate, like national player of the year potential. And K-States are more so like really, really good players. So I think that there is a lot to like for it. And I guess we'll see how it goes. Kind of back to what you said about earlier when we talk about K-State having the best duo on the floor. I think that tomorrow night they do still have the best duo on the floor in the sense of the thing that sets their duo apart from others is like Dick and Wilson are the same size. And Dick and Wilson want to do a lot of the same things. And I think they both want to be the guy. Whereas the thing that sets K-State apart with their top two guys from a lot of other teams in college basketball is that Marquise Noel is a guard. Keontae Johnson is a forward that can step out and do a lot of different things. They can facilitate with each other a whole lot better than a lot of others to where they can play kind of a 1-2 game where a lot of the other guys, it's like, all right, this possession, we're going to let Grady Dick figure out what he's doing. This possession, we're going to let Jalen Wilson kind of take the lead. At K-State, they work hand in hand so well together, and I think that's an important thing. So that's something that I would add on that, and why I think K-State is going to have a lot of chances to get a win against Kansas's or whoever else it is that they end up on the floor against the rest of the way in Big 12 play, and then eventually when you get to NCAA tournament time, as long as they just pick up a few more wins and they'll be there. So I think that's an important thing to note. Thinking about some of the other guys that are going to have to play a pretty impactful role against Kansas this week. Naquan Tomlin is going to be very significant, and I think him finding a way to keep himself out of foul trouble. He actually had kind of a silent good game against TCU. He ended up with I think 10 rebounds in the game. Were his final numbers? Yeah. Yeah, he's pretty efficient from the floor, 10 boards, 5 assists, and he limited his turnovers. If you can get Naquan Tomlin to come out and more so than anything, be ready to play good defense against whoever he's matched up against. I think that's going to be interesting to see how K-State decides to approach, all right, Keontae's on this guy, Naquan's on this guy. If you were Jerome Tang, who does Naquan Tomlin guard tomorrow night?
I think I'd probably put him on Adams just because I like the athleticism matchup there. I think that if you put Bebe on KJ Adams, I think that Bebe's lack of athleticism is something that could get exposed a little bit against KJ Adams and KJ's ability to run the floor and his ability to elevate and play above the rim. While Bebe is 7 foot, Bebe obviously isn't the most quick laterally, like vertically running the floor. I think he excels. That's somewhere where he gets a lot of his points is at the rim in transition, but in the half court, Baby is going to struggle, I think, a little bit, especially playing on the perimeter, even though that Adams doesn't shoot a ton from the perimeter or at all from the perimeter. He can kind of play on the perimeter and facilitate from out there. And I don't think that that's an advantageous matchup for K-State. So I would expect that Naquan Tomlin actually ends up matching up against KJ Adams just from the pure athleticism standpoint of this. And to go back to what we were talking about, how K-State might have a size advantage or the size kind of cancels itself out a little bit against Kansas. Sometimes I think against a team that's smaller like Kansas, it's almost a disadvantage to have a traditional big like Bebe. And I know Bebe is not your like quote unquote traditional big because he's so tall and he's kind of thin. Like he's not thicker. He's not someone who's going to back to the basket, turn around, hook off the glass for 2 points, 14, 15 times a game, right? Like that's not the type of player he is. But I think it's going to be really easy for Bill Self to maybe almost scheme Bebe Ijiola out of the game for K-State. And a lot of times when you talk about a team having a major size advantage in a game like this, you think, well, that player should be able to score at will on the interior. Well, one, Bebe is not a great scorer in the interior. In the last 2 games, he hasn't had a field goal. His only 2 points came at the free throw line in the win over Oklahoma State. And that's kind of telling. He did get blocked at the rim in transition against TCU on a first half possession game, or no, first half possession, I should say. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bill Self almost schemes Bebe out, and K-State has to play small with someone like Ish Massoud playing at the 4.
That's what I was going to ask. Can you really play Bebe tomorrow if you're K-State? Because if he's not going to be on KJ Adams, he certainly can't be put on Jalen Wilson. And then
I
your
think
next
he's going to
option
get
is to
schemed
put him
out.
on like a smaller guy. Like he only played 10 minutes against TCU over the weekend as well.
I think he's going to get schemed out, and I think we're kind of seeing right now why Bebe's kind of fluctuated between, playing at the Power 5 level, playing at Arkansas, and then playing at a mid-major, low-major level at other times in his career. Like he has the impressive size and he has quality athleticism to be a decent rim runner, but he also is really going to struggle in the half court, and his length makes him a strong defender in some areas, but his lack of physicality, it makes it easy to kind of take advantage of him at the same time. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Bebe only plays 10 minutes, and I almost wouldn't even be surprised myself if K-State changes their starting lineup a little bit tomorrow night to match up.
I think it's likely.
Really?
Now, the big question, well, I mean, that's just from an assumption standpoint. That maybe you try to send Bebe out there early on, but I think you're opening yourself out to Kansas doing a lot of things early on offensively that could put you in an early hole if Bebe's out there. Because, like I said, he struggled defending even TCU over the weekend, and he got kind of caught drifting away from the paint. And the one thing that he can't do is do that, especially against a team like TCU that shoots under 30% from 3. So I just kind of wonder if, even though Ish Massoud isn't the greatest of defenders, I kind of feel like he adds a little bit more to you. Obviously, he can hit shots from the outside. That's been something that is really important to see from Massoud this season, is that he's become a better shooter. He's been more consistent when they need him to knock one down on an open look. He is doing it. He had a couple against TCU over the weekend. Obviously, he hit the ones down in Baylor that were big. So I think that's one of those deals. And it's unfortunate for K-State that David Gasson has not been healthy. It seems like he's getting closer to it. Jerome Tang, I know, said prior to the game starting and on his radio interview with Wyatt Thompson on Saturday that they treated Gasson like a game time decision on Saturday. They knew he wasn't going to be able to go, though. So he's got to be getting close, but maybe, Tang is going to talk to the media this afternoon. Maybe we get a little bit more insight as to if Gasson is going to be able to go against Kansas, because that would be a significant thing to have him in there, because he can match up a little bit better athletically. And then I wouldn't be as concerned if he had to guard either Wilson or Adams or whoever. So I don't know. I think Ish Massoud is going to need to have a good game tomorrow for K-State, and he's got the athleticism too. He may let some guys get by him and get lost occasionally, but he also has the athleticism and length to catch up to guys or make a couple of plays that I just don't know that Bebe is going to be able to have in a game like tomorrow. So I think, honestly, when it comes down to filling out a starting lineup, Jerome Tang is going to have to decide if they're confident that they can do what they want to do with Bebe and kind of assert their dominance against Kansas, or if they're the ones that ultimately have to kind of concede and call off the dogs and say, all right, we're making a switch to match up a little bit better here. And it'll be interesting to kind of see how it plays out. But like I said, he only had 10 against TCU. The most minutes he's played in a conference game, and really his most games in all year, was 25 at Baylor. He had 16 against Oklahoma State. That was a tougher matchup. If Musa Cisse had been available, he maybe would have seen some more time. And then he only played 14 minutes against Texas and 22 minutes against West Virginia. He's played really well in conference play. Like I want to give him a bunch of props for how he has played. I think he's been a good addition for K-State, but there are just going to be some games with the way he plays and the way he's built that he's not going to be able to be much of a factor. And the more I look at it and think about it, there's a lot of things that I like matchup-wise for K-State. Bebe Ijiola just isn't one of them. And maybe I look like a fool tomorrow after he plays 20 minutes and is able to do a bunch of stuff for him. But I just get the feeling that we're not going to see a ton of him tomorrow night.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Does Tang change the starting lineup? I don't know. And I like how you kind of brought up the availability or the mystery that surrounds David Kassan. And I would add too that even if he's determined to be able to go tomorrow night, I don't know how much like he'll even play because I question where his conditioning level is going to be at. Like if he's got a lower body, a foot, ankle injury, like he's probably not doing a ton of conditioning stuff or particularly running. Like you can probably put him on a bike. You can probably put him on some other conditioning things that K-State probably has in their weight room. Maybe he's swimming. I don't know. But I wouldn't expect him to be able to play at a high level. And this is something I'll ask Jerome Tang later tonight, or this afternoon, I guess you should say, is if he is able to play, what's his conditioning level going to be at? Because he's missed a couple weeks now. Like he hasn't played since, I guess the West Virginia game was the first game he missed. And that was a shoulder injury at the time, right? I mean, that's what was said on the radio broadcast of that game. And I know it was reported by some other people that it was a shoulder injury at that time. And then it kind of transitioned to, okay, now it's a foot/ankle, lower body thing. So maybe it's compounding different injuries that he's dealing with, but his conditioning level, I don't think is going to be suited to play a game at a fervent pace. And I don't think K-State's going to want to do that against Kansas. I mean, think about, like, I'm sure you watched the Mizzou-Kansas game before Christmas, and Mizzou wants to play at a really fast pace. That's what Dennis Gates is. That's what his teams have always done. But to do that against a Kansas team when you have significantly worse players than Kansas does, like you are asking to get run out of the gym. And that's exactly what happened in the game against Kansas and Mizzou. And well, I do think K-State's better than Mizzou. Like I think Mizzou's a team that, similar to Iowa State last year, started really hot, got ranked in the top 25, and then kind of struggled in league play, but did enough to still get into the tournament. I think Mizzou gives you that same kind of mold where they're elite at one thing, Mizzou on offense, Iowa State last year, both are in the top 10 efficiency-wise, but not very good at the other end of things. Like Mizzou's in the 170s, I think, in defensive efficiency, and I know Iowa State really struggled to shoot and offensively last year under TJ Ottensberger. Did I say that right, by the way? I really struggle with this. Otzelberger? There's an L in there?
Yeah.
Okay, Otzelberger. That's kind of fun to say.
Well, it's great. Iowa State, whatever. By the way, just in case you're concerned or need to know, the top 25 is out. K-State only drops 2 spots to number 13 this week.
Number 13.
So that's
you a lucky or unlucky 13 guy.
Don't care one way or the other about 13. Desi Sills number 13. So it's lucky because Desi's great. Let's see, TCU at 14, so they move up 3 spots. Iowa State moved up 2 spots. They are to number 12 this week. So they get a good respect after their 2-point loss in Allen Fieldhouse. Texas is up to number 7. That's a weird one to me. Whatever. And then KU is at number 2. And Baylor is back in the top 25 at number 21 this week. So that is your Big 12 breakdown. KU at 2, Texas at 7, Iowa State 12, K-State 13, TCU 14, Baylor at 21. Let's see if any your Illini got 61 votes. Good for them. And nobody else in the Big 12 was receiving votes this week. So
the AP poll sucks. The fact that Arizona State's not ranked is a joke.
They got 79 votes.
Who I just got a text message from that they are not ranked. Oh, they are ranked.
Yeah.
Wait, no, I'm confused.
No, they got 79 votes. They are unofficially number 28. They're behind.
Then why am I looking at a tweet from NCAA March Madness on Twitter right now that has Arizona State ranked 11th? Are they confusing them with the Arizona Wildcats?
Yes, Arizona is number 11. They dropped
also, how the hell is Arkansas ranked? Arkansas has been awful the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, they dropped 10 spots to 25. They don't deserve to be there, but all right, we'll get back on track. I don't hate the AP poll. I just take it for what it is, and it's good when your team is ranked, and when it's not, you can bitch about it and say things like, it sucks. The AP, they don't know what they're doing.
The AP poll sucks.
As long as K-State's in it, they know these guys know what they're doing. They know ball. A couple of other things thinking about tomorrow night's game. I mean, you got to see what the crowd was like for Oklahoma State, and there have been these different things in K-State lore that I try to get you up to speed on. and you've expected some things, you didn't know what to get with others. What do you expect based off of everything that's been said to you about a K-State KU crowd when you walk into Bramlage tomorrow?
Maybe a few expletives tossed in the direction of Grady Dick.
Probably not off base with that. I don't know. This
Don't
is a
cross the
cleaner
line,
crowd.
K-State
This is
fans. Don't cross
this
the
is a
line.
cleaner crowd right now, though. I mean, Jerome Tang is rehabilitated. K-State fans. So our pals at Jayhawk Slant reached out to me this morning to answer a couple of questions about the game coming up.
Are you saying that
And
Kansas people are your pals? Is that
Are-
what you just said?
our colleagues,
There you
our
go.
rivals counterparts in Lawrence.
I wish I knew. I wish I could share some of the things you said on the drive back from Fort Worth, but we don't have time for that.
Well, I can share one thing, and I said that I can count on both of my hands how many people that went to the University of Kansas that I actually consider friends, because it's a small number. There aren't many of them out there. But he asked me kind of what to expect from the crowd tomorrow, and he said, "Hey, look, like," and this was Shea Wildeboer, who does great basketball stuff for him, but he said to me, like, that crowd's always really into it. It's a great environment. And I said, I really think that what to expect tomorrow from the crowd is going to be one of the better crowds since like the Frank days at K-State, because what you had over the last however many years, like Bramlage was always going to fill up with people that hated KU. And so when you have, that many people in one building that are brought together by their hate of something, like you're going to get a pretty passionate crowd. But the one thing that K-State has going this year is that, I mean, there's still going to be all that hate for Kansas, as there should be. Like, that's what a rivalry is about. But also, you're going to have fans there that love Jerome Tang, the staff, the team. Like, they're actually there this year, not just because they hate Kansas, but also because they love this basketball team and they're really into it and they appreciate what's going on. And that's something that I just feel like K-State hasn't had in a while. I mean, even 2019 when they won the Big 12 championship, like, that's still like people were walking on eggshells with Bruce because they just knew at a moment's notice they could flip back into not being his biggest fan. And that's kind of what happened. So I think it's going to be a dynamite environment tomorrow in Bramlage, and it's going to be really, really exciting to kind of see what is going to happen. And they'll be in there early. I mean, I don't know this year how early the students are getting in. I assume it'll be like in past years where students were getting in like 2 hours before tip-off for the KU game, and they'll all be lined up throughout the day. So it'll be a pretty exciting and entertaining environment to see the Cats and the Jayhawks tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fired up to see it. Obviously, I've been fortunate enough to see some awesome college basketball environments, but this is something new. This is a new rivalry to experience. This is something that's unique. Not very often you get a ton of great in-state rivalries across the country, and obviously there's a few that are great, but this is one that I haven't had a chance to experience, and I'm really excited to be able to be inside Bramlage and experience it, and also be able to experience it with two teams that are ranked in the top 13 of the polls, and two teams that there's a lot of excitement about. Obviously, Kansas coming off a national title. We don't need to dive into the excitement around Kansas basketball. I feel like it's the same every single year, but for a K-State team that was picked in the preseason to finish last in the Big 12, to be at a spot now where they only have one loss in the Big 12 through the first 4 or 5 games of the season, I guess 5-6 games of the season, I should say, in league play, and to be exceeding expectations and to be playing a fun brand of basketball with Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson, like, you combine those things all together and it should create, for, like you said, an awesome environment. And, I've heard a lot about Octagon of Doom. So far, Mason, I think it's fair to say, like, it hasn't shown up this year. It flirted with it a little bit, I think, Oklahoma State last week. But
okay, easy, Jerome Tang and staff calling out the fans already.
I think tomorrow night I'm going to be fully introduced to what has been known as the Octagon of Doom. So, yeah. And by the way, I think it's an awesome nickname for a stadium.
Yeah, well, I wrote after the game, like, the game against Oklahoma State, you could feel it, and it had some moments where it was like, okay, this is back. I mean, that was a Tuesday night against a bottom of the league team, and the fact that it was that full and everything that K-State basketball is coming off of, like, that was significant, and that's why it was a start of it coming back. But with KU on the horizon and everything else that's still left this year, like, it was going to be early to say that it was back, but tomorrow it should be, and it's going to be, an awesome environment to go into. All right, we talked about some of the matchup stuff and other things. You've been working on the preview for the game. Is there anything that stood out to you kind of in your research and build up for this game on either team that you think is notable heading into tomorrow night?
Yeah, obviously, I think Kansas is one of the premier three-point shooting teams in the country. They're top 35 in the country, and of course, that's led by Grady Dick, who's making 48% of his shots on the perimeter, and it's at a really high volume too. I mean, he's taking more than 5 threes a game, close to 6, I think. So he's obviously one that you have to close out on, but also Jalen Wilson takes more threes a game than Grady Dick. He just makes much less of them than Grady Dick. He's only at 33% on the season instead of, like I said, close to 50. So K-State's going to have to defend the three-point line because even though Wilson won't shoot a super high percentage, or at least numbers suggest he won't shoot a super high percentage, he'll make enough to hurt you from behind the perimeter. But I know this is something that you kind of have pointed out early in the season and have talked about less, I think, as the season has progressed, is K-State's perimeter defense early in the year. You talked a lot about how often they were leaving open shooters, and now they're not doing that as much. And it's coincided with their three-point defense really improving. I think it's top 40 or top 45, I think, in the country at this point in the season. And that's something that, that shows a lot of discipline, that shows, where they're at. And I think it also shows a little bit of maybe who they've played.
I think that's a lot of it. They've played some bad shooting teams like TCU and Oklahoma State.
Yeah, TCU, Oklahoma State, bad shooting teams, haven't played a lot of great mid-major, low-major teams. And even out of conference, high-major teams they've played. I know LSU's kind of exceeding expectations, similar to how K-State is in the Big 12 and / the SEC. But Butler's a team that's flirting with 500 at this point. Cal's obviously in the bottom half, bottom tier of the Conference of Champions. And, their non-conference schedule didn't feature a ton of great teams. But we saw them against a team like Baylor, struggle defensively a little bit at times. And obviously they gave up more than 100 points in the win over Texas. And both those games were played at a really high pace. And both those are really good offensive teams. But K-State's going to have to maintain a high level of integrity on perimeter defense, because if you don't, Grady Dick will silence the Octagon of Doom with 5 or 6 threes in the first half.
Well, this is, I'm team none of them, but I've thought all season long, Grady Dick scares me more than Jalen Wilson. I think Grady Dick deserves to get probably more of the looks and more of the shine than what Jalen Wilson does. If you look at it on the season right now, Jalen Wilson's attempted almost 100 more shots than Grady Dick. That seems outrageous for the fact that they're both pretty talented players. And then you take into account, Jalen Wilson has also attempted more threes than Grady Dick this season, despite the fact that Grady Dick is shooting 48% from three and Jalen Wilson is 33%. So I think Grady Dick is the scariest guy out there. And I honestly think that's the guy that concerns me the most, especially because I was weary of the 3-point defense all season for K-State. The good news is, if you look around, KU doesn't have a ton of other guys that actually shoot the ball that well from deep. Grady Dick is carrying them in that regard. KU shooting 37.5% from three this year. But of the guys that are going to see major minutes, Wilson's 33%, McCullough is under 32%. And then DeJuan Harris is shooting 50%, but very rarely is he actually going to shoot the ball. So K-State doesn't have to worry about that too much for Kansas. You just got to lock into really Dick and then Wilson if he's going to take them. So I think that's a benefit here. And another thing that, at least, I'm not saying that it means K-State is going to beat KU tomorrow night, but just kind of adds into that theory I have that I think K-State matches up with KU a lot better than they have, obviously, in past years, but also than a lot of other teams in the Big 12 this season. So we'll see where it ends up going from there.
Just to put that into perspective, Jalen Wilson's usage rate for Kansas is 29.4%. So he's being the primary facilitator or handler of their offense nearly 30% of the time. And that's really, really high. That's one of the highest in the entire country. And to kind of continue to highlight that, Dick is actually below Kevin McCullough, he's below MJ Rice, he's below KJ Adams. So that says a lot about where Dick is. They run him a lot off of actions to get shots on the perimeter, shots behind the 3-point line, obviously, and he takes a lot of them and he makes them. But Dick isn't someone that they're going to put the ball in his hands and say, hey, go make a play. That's what they use Jalen Wilson for, and Jalen Wilson is obviously really good at that as someone who's averaging over 19 points a game, and his assist rate is close to 15%, which isn't great, but it does lead the team.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it ends up going down. Do you want to give your pick away, or do you want to make people wait until we publish the preview, or do you want to give that out right now?
I can get my pick out.
What is your pick?
I'm gonna need to open the story real quick.
Okay, all right.
I did pick Kansas. I do think that Kansas is one of the. So last week in the Big 12 rankings, last week in our Big 12 rankings, I wrote that I thought Kansas was arguably the best team in the country. The way that they've played in Big 12 play makes me think otherwise, and not because I think Kansas isn't very good, and not because I don't think the Big 12 is very good, but I think if Kansas is one of the best teams in America, one of the 2 best teams in the country, as I wrote, that they should be pounding teams like Oklahoma, like Oklahoma State,
but also like who then would you put at number 1? Because like Houston is number 1 right now. Houston beat South Florida by 6 yesterday. Alabama is playing like the best team in the country.
Bama's the team that I would consider doing it with. I wrote in my pick.
Now they did just have a player allegedly murder somebody, so that might.
He wasn't a high. He wasn't a.
Yeah, he was out for the season, but that's.
He hadn't played since
you want to talk about distractions? I don't know that. And here's the thing with Alabama. I think the thing that concerns me there from their play on the floor is like over the last however many years, I love Nate Oates. Like I love the way he plays basketball. You've learned about me very quickly here.
The entertainment brand today. Look who's transitioning to my side of the argument.
No, I've always loved just letting the threes fly. Like that's my style of play.
Yeah, you'd rather watch people shoot free throws.
No, here's the problem with Alabama. With that style, they have a game or two like every couple of weeks where they just bottom out and they look disgusting. And that's why I can't ever fully get on board with them being number 1, because the second they become the number 1 team, they are going to be they're going to lose to, I don't know, like who's a good example? Because I mean, Arkansas just lost to Vandy, Kentucky lost to South Carolina. They will lose to I don't know, some crappy SEC. They'll lose to Missouri, even though Missouri's okay. But they will lose that game, and then I'll go, oh, really? I think KU is probably the number 1 team in the country right now, because despite the fact that they're not like blowing these teams out, they're still winning games in the toughest conference in America, and they haven't lost one of them yet in this conference, and they've got guys that just can find ways to get it done. We'll see what happens tomorrow night. KU probably to me is number 1 right now. I like the idea of it being Houston, but like they've pounded a few teams in the American, but they've also struggled to put some teams away. Like they are a very like Jekyll and Hyde team where one night you're going to get a team that's locked in and going to beat somebody by 30. And other nights you're going to get them at home only beating a team that's the worst shooting team in America by 6. So I don't know. We'll see how it ends up working out. But I think Kansas is probably the number 1 team. And the AP poll kind of reflects that this week. If you look at, I mean, Houston got the most number 1 votes, but if you look, I always find this interesting. They got 11 more first place votes than Kansas, but KU is only 14 points off of Houston in the poll, which means the people that don't have Houston number 1 have Houston at like 3, 4, 5. They don't really buy in to what the Cougars are doing. Whereas there's a pretty good consensus that Kansas is at least one of the 2 best teams in the country as we stand right now.
Yeah, so to keep this going, I would say that I think Alabama's right there in the top like 3, 4 teams in the country. I think UCLA has made a strong point to be considered in that group as well. But Alabama's offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency are both ranked in the top 12 in the country right now, according to KenPom. And to compare it to like last season, an Alabama team that was good but wasn't, the Alabama team of the 2021 season, I think the biggest difference for Alabama this year and the Alabama last year is they guard at a much higher level this year. I mean, they were in the 90s, I think, last year in offense or in defensive efficiency. Their offense is always going to be pretty high just because of how many threes they make. But I really like how this Alabama team plays. I think they have some experienced guard play with guys like Quinterly, and they have an explosive freshman in Brandon Miller. So I think Alabama has potential to make it to the Final Four, win a national title. And that would really upset America, I think, if Alabama basketball started to win national titles, because their football team does the same thing. But
I'm good. I'm good with Alabama basketball winning it, because that's just a foreign thing. Like, that would be fun. And like I said, I love Nate Oates.
Yeah,
I hate Alabama football. Like, I just let somebody else win it, but now don't let Georgia win it. But Alabama basketball, whatever. I think that'd be fun. That'd be great.
So I do agree, though, with what you said, like with their style of play. Like, if they throw an absolute clunker up there shooting wise, like, I do have concerns.
That's why I wouldn't ever pick Alabama to win the NCAA tournament, because I have a tough time seeing them do it over a 6-game stretch.
But the reason you can pick them is because of how good their defense is now. Like, their defense is really, really good. I think, like I said, Houston's in that same kind of conversation. But the issue with Houston is, like, they're offensively efficient. Their offense is really efficient, but I feel like it's really efficient because they get a lot of second chance opportunities because they're so good on the offensive glass. Like, they go through some real long lulls offensively that are really, really tough to watch. And that's really frustrating. And I don't think their guard play is as good as we kind of want it to be, or thought it was going to be. And I think UCLA, Mason, is right here in the same kind of conversation with Kansas as a team with an elite 1-2 punch the Bruins have, with guys like Tiger Campbell and Jaime Jaquez Jr. And then Jalen Clark plays so well as a third option for them. He knocks down so many big shots. Again, they're really good defensively. Offensively, they're top 15, I think, in the country in a lot of major categories. So I actually really like this UCLA team a lot. Someone like Adeem Bona is going to continue to get better on the inside, and we'll see how good Amari Bailey is come the end of the tournament. But, we've seen a lot of teams maybe cool. I mean, Purdue's someone who I know is still just 16-1, but took a tough home loss to Rutgers. That's not something that you want on your resume. And I know Rutgers is really good this year. Like, I shouldn't say really good. Rutgers is ranked right now. They're good. But Purdue can't lose that game at home. We've seen Connecticut, I think, lose 4 or 5 since earning the number 1 ranking. I think we all kind of doubt what Texas really can do without Chris Beard in the long run. This Gonzaga team's not awesome. A sneaky team that I think is actually really good is Xavier. They're 15-3 on the year. Yeah. Their defense has started to really improve here over the last couple of weeks, I think, and their offense is obviously really awesome as well. But yeah, there's just not a lot of teams that wow me this year in college basketball, and it's really frustrating for someone who likes to know what to expect. And every single night, I'm like, God, all these teams are just terrible.
See, that's the life in the Big 12, though. You never know what's coming. And I would say, like, to tie this all back in, that bodes really well for K-State when they get to the NCAA tournament this year, because as has been talked about, like Keontae Johnson and Marquise Noel, when they take the floor, there aren't a ton of teams that are going to have a better top 2 players than those guys. And in addition to that, like, I continue to think that Naquan Tomlin is only going to get better as the season goes on, and he can be a real weapon. Like, with the unpredictability of college basketball this season, like, K-State, and this is not me saying it's going to happen, but they can make a deep run this year. Like, they can be a team that pops up there, and it could be a really fun March for K-State, and that is really exciting. And I think that's why a game like tomorrow night against Kansas is so important, because then you can go ahead and kind of give a tease to that. Like, if K-State is really going to be the real deal this year, like, can they separate themselves from a tournament team and turn themselves into truly one of the 10 or 15 best teams in college basketball this year? I think it starts by going toe-to-toe and trying to take down Kansas tomorrow. Now, I don't know that I'm going to pick K-State to win the game. I mean, you said last week you kind of got the feeling that K-State does beat KU, but I don't think that's what you're going to put down on paper or in writing, because you don't want, you feel like a fool when you pick against Kansas. Like, that's just how things work in this world.
Yes.
But you can see how it would happen. The crowd, the way K-State's playing, everything about it, like, they have a really good chance going into that game tomorrow against the Jayhawks. So, you've had time. What is your pick for tomorrow night, K-State KU?
Yeah, I picked Kansas to win 76-73.
Okay, all right.
How heartbreaking would it be if it's like a Grady Dick 3 at the buzzer?
I mean, I don't know. I kind of saw Ochai Agbaji break K-State's heart last year in Bramlage, so I don't know. I don't know that I would really be that. I'm kind of like numb to that situation now. Like, I just, whatever, here it comes. Like, that entire that entire second half last year, I just was like, it's coming at some point. Like it's inevitable. It's not going to happen. It's just what goes down against these guys. And sure enough, that's what happened. It was just that was brutal. That was a tough watch there. That was I went as a fan last year. I had not been to a K-State basketball game as a fan since my freshman year of college. And so I took some tickets that we had at the radio station, and I took my brother. So it was my middle brother's first time ever at a K-State KU basketball game and getting to experience that. I mean, that first half was awesome. Bill Self was burning through timeouts like there was no tomorrow. He used 3 of them. Nigel Pack was on fire, and it was just like, holy cow, like this is a lot of fun. But then you have to sit for 15 minutes at halftime and go, this is not going to last. Like, just how is it going to happen? And KU had it like within single digits, like instantly in the second half. And K-State was able to do enough, keep them at arm's length until Abaji in the final minute was able to put them on top. So that was tough to see. And I was excited for that because I have not been able to be in Bramlage for a K-State win against KU for the entirety of the game. My only other time where I was in Bramlage for a K-State win against KU was 2019. K-State goes on to win the Big 12. I was there for the Cartier-Jada windmill that sent everybody into a frenzy. That's probably one of the loudest moments in Bramlage history for a long, long time. But I had to call Manhattan High Junction City basketball that night. I drew the short end of the stick. Somehow my boy Mitch Fortner, he lucked out of it. He did not have to do that. I did. And I immediately, as soon as the game was over, sorry to head coach Benji George, great guy, great basketball coach. I did not stick around to do an interview with him after the game. I packed everything up. I ran to my car. I hopped in it and I drove to Bramlage. And I had to park in like the rec center parking lot and run all the way up to the steps and try and find somebody that would open the door and let me in. Like I showed him my credentials, like, hey, whatever. I got in with like, I don't know. It was under 10 minutes left to play in the game. So I got to experience that. But I'm still waiting to see an actual K-State KU game where K-State wins it for a full 40 minutes that I'm actually there. And it could happen tomorrow night. I think the way it plays out, K-State and KU go just trade off runs with each other. I think there's going to be probably 5 or 6 of those moments in the game where you feel like somebody might be taking control. And just as soon as you think that's happening, somebody's going to get right back into it. And the coaches are going to have to trade well-timed timeouts. And that's how this whole thing is probably going to end up working out. Just because I've seen this movie so many times before, I'm taking Kansas 81-74 tomorrow is what I'm going with. I can't be the homer that just takes K-State every game. So I got to go based off of history and sadness from the fan and alumni side of me that's seen this movie play out too many times before. But I think K-State does have a real chance tomorrow, and I think it's going to be a great game. Like, it's not just this is not just going to be a good game because it's K-State KU. It's a rivalry, and people in the region appreciate it. This is going to be a game. I mean, it's ESPN 6 o'clock tomorrow, so right after Sports Center, everybody's at home watching the game, and you're going to get number 2 versus number 13. This is just going to be a legit college basketball game, not just the K-State KU game. Like, this is a game tomorrow that is playing towards being a really good college basketball game that the entire country can enjoy. And win or lose, that's a really good thing for K-State, and that says they're in a really good spot under Jerome Tang and everything moving forward. So we'll see how it ends up playing out. But I'm excited for tomorrow for the environment and kind of what it means for the future of K-State basketball.
Yeah, I think you said that all really well, and I can't wait to be inside Bramlage tomorrow night for what is hopefully a really entertaining basketball game.
Yeah, it should be a good time. Let's see here. Best of luck to everybody that is playing basketball today. Whatever, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. They've decided to make this a college basketball holiday. This is for the NBA today. Like, watching the Grizzlies play on MLK Day, like, I always just remember that. They're always like afternoon on TNT. But your Illini play today, so good luck to them against Minnesota. Best of luck.
I think I'm going to do a little doubleheader action, feed some quality Big Ten basketball. I should say non-quality Big Ten basketball because Minnesota's playing into your Dallas Cowboys.
Yep. Well, it should be a great
That's right,
night there.
7:30, right?
Yeah, so somewhere around that.
You got a pick for that
I'm
one?
also planning for a loss for that one for the Cowboys. So
you're picking Tampa.
yeah, most likely.
Where's
Tomorrow,
your money going to be at?
on none of them. I'm just gonna enjoy the game as a fan tonight, not as a bettor. That seems like the right thing to do. A couple of quick things about the Big 12 as we round this out. Texas and Iowa State play tomorrow. That's another great game. That's 7:00, number 7 versus number 12. And then Baylor goes on the road to Texas Tech. The Red Raiders trying to avoid an 0-6 start to Big 12 play tomorrow night against Baylor, who seems to have a little bit of their mojo back. I don't feel great about the chances for the Red Raiders and the rest of their season.
Yeah, Mark Adams is,
yeah.
They did look a lot better at Texas. Fardaws Amik, I think is how you say his name, came back, but he wasn't great. Obviously, playing off a broken foot, broken ankle, whatever it was. Yeah, Texas Tech's just not good.
Yeah, not great.
Neither West Virginia, by the way. And I don't think Oklahoma State's very good either. Like, I think those 3 teams almost the tournament.
I agree. That's the thing with the Big 12. Like, everybody can talk about, like, they could get 8 or 9 or 10 teams in. At some point, like, some of the bottom teams in the Big 12, like, they could probably pass and make it into the tournament if they were playing in other conferences. But in the Big 12, there are 3 teams that don't appear to be good enough to actually do the bare minimum to be a tournament team this year. And that would be West Virginia right now, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech. Now, honestly, I still believe a little bit in West Virginia. Like, they have some pieces, but I don't know that all the pieces fit together. So on the right night, West Virginia can do something. Like Wednesday night, TCU goes to Morgantown. Like, West Virginia could easily win that game, but I just don't see a world where West Virginia is able to piece everything together enough to win enough of the games they need. Like, we talk about it. If you come in with a decent non-con record, if you go 7-11, 8-10 in the Big 12, you're likely a tournament team. But West Virginia's 0-5 right now. So they are running out of room to be a tournament team with how everything plays out, which leads to the final thing I want to do here. A little exercise as we are 5 games into the Big 12 season at this point in time. We're going to run and rip through these real quick. Kansas is first place in the league at 5-0. Does Kansas win the league, and what is their final record in conference play at the end of the season?
Kansas wins the league, and their final record is 14-4, 13-3.
Okay.
That's not right. 13-3 doesn't work.
14-4, 15-3 is what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say, 15-3.
Yeah, I think 14-4 is probably about right. And 14-4 historically wins you the Big 12. So I would go with that. I think the way I'm looking at it right now, I'm gonna say K-State finishes. I think there's going to be K-State, Texas, and Iowa State all finish in like the 11-7 range. Maybe one of them gets to 12-6. And TCU could be thrown into that category too. But I think those teams are all right around there. And then Baylor and Oklahoma, they're 2-3 right now. Baylor probably has a chance to get to like 10-8 with the way things line up. That means that they'd have to go 8-5 over their last 13 conference games. But Oklahoma is going to be the weaker link in a lot of the games they play. Oklahoma is probably a team that finishes 8-10, maybe 7-11 in conference play. And based off everything else, that'd probably be enough for them to get in.
Yeah, they're probably in. But I don't think they're good. Like, I know Grant Sherfield's awesome.
I agree. I don't think they're great.
But
do you think there is any team that finishes with 5 or less wins in Big 12 play this year? So really, your candidates are O State, Tech, and West Virginia.
No, I think Texas Tech probably gets 5 wins. But I would say that they're closer to like 6 than they are to 7.
Mm-hmm. Last year, for reference, there was only one team that finished 4-14, less than 6 wins. That was West Virginia. K-State was 6-12 in the league last year. The year prior to that, there were 3 teams that finished with less than 6 wins. Now, that was the COVID year, but that was TCU, K-State, and Iowa State. And then the year before that, there were 2 teams, Iowa State and K-State, that were at the bottom of the league. So with under 6 wins. So it happens, and there's bound to be at least one team that does it. I think if I had to pick one right now, I would probably go Texas Tech, because I just really think the wheels could fall off there. I think West Virginia, for whatever, maybe it's Huggins, maybe it's some of the pieces they have, but I still think that they're good enough to beat some teams down the stretch and pile up more than 5 or 6 wins in conference play. I think Texas Tech, I think that's a mess down there. I don't think Mark Adams is a very inspiring guy to play for. And obviously we know that they had some other situations with players maybe flirting with leaving or whatever else. I don't believe in Texas Tech right now. And Oklahoma State, Mike Boynton, nice guy, great guy. I don't think he's a good basketball coach in the Big 12. So unfortunately, Oklahoma State's going to continue to suck, but it's tough stuff. At least K-State doesn't. We get to watch good basketball on a day in, day out basis, which is not something that could be said over the last couple of years for K-State. So we'll get ready. K-State, KU tomorrow. We will have plenty of coverage on EMAW Online before, during, and after the game to get everybody their fix and be excited for the Cats and the Jayhawks from Bramlage Coliseum. So be prepared for that and everything else that comes with it. If you enjoy our content on here, you can obviously subscribe on the YouTube page, but be sure to get signed up over at EMAW Online with Rivals to get full coverage of K-State every single day from me, Alec, and Gabe. One of our teams, I went to K-State, Alec went to Illinois, Gabe went to Arizona State. One of our teams is in the top 25. Cats. Feels pretty good. Best of luck to the Illini on this Monday as well. And we look forward to the energy and the excitement and maybe a few bad words inside Bramlage Coliseum tomorrow night when the Cats take on the Jayhawks. But that'll do it for Alec and I. We'll see you sometime on EMAW Online.